At Talladega Speedway in 1987, Bill Elliott set the fastest lap in NASCAR history at 212.8 miles per hour. Later that weekend, Bobby Allison would crash in dramatic fashion and NASCAR would be changed forever. This forced the sport to start to slow down, but one man who didn't slow down was Bill Elliott. Bill and his team, Melling Racing, would go on a historic run from 1983 to 1988 where they never finished worse than fourth in the final point standings. So, how did they beat the competition? The answer is pretty easy: on pure speed. Today we're going to look at NASCAR's fastest driver in the fastest era of the sport and how dominant Bill and his iconic Ford Thunderbird were at this time, especially at the 2+ mile tracks. At the age of 19, Bill and his dad George decided to go cup racing. They ran a limited schedule, racing about 10 races a season. Unlike most startup and part-time teams, who would enter predominantly short track races, the Elliots raced mostly at the big tracks: Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta, Michigan, Charlotte, and so on. Also, unlike most part-time, small teams, the Elliots had speed. In 65 races across Elliott's first 6 seasons, he had 23 top 10s and even came one spot short of winning the 1979 Southern 500. The 81 season was highlighted by Elliott's first career pole at the Spring Darlington race. The Elliots would get a big break at the end of the 1981 season. Harry Melling, president of his family's business, the Melling Tool Company, had been a sponsor for a couple of seasons for the Elliots, including 12 races in the 1987 season. Harry enjoyed his time in NASCAR so much that he bought the team from George Elliott and formed Melling Racing. This would give the family a lot more financial stability and, more importantly, a lighter workload for Bill so he could focus on racing more races. We would get a sneak peek of Bill's dominance to come at superspeedways whenever he took pole at Michigan in 1982. Although the team didn't get a win that season, they were able to score 8 top 5s and managed to get to the track for 21 races. The next year in 1983, Bill was able to race the full Winston Cup schedule for the first time in his career. After second place in the Daytona 500, at Rockingham, Riverside, and then Darlington, Bill ended the year on a high note, winning the season finale at Riverside. Although he only led 173 laps all season, Bill had a super consistent year and finished third in the final points, boasting both an average starting spot and finishing position inside the top 10. Elliott's next big break came over that offseason, where his team secured a full season sponsorship from Coors. Melling Racing finally emerged this year, showing up with a chance of winning the pole any given week. Elliott was qualifying in the top 7 virtually every week, but didn't start securing poles until mid-season. He converted his first pole of the season to his first win of the season, snagged another pole at Pocono a couple weeks later, and then completed the sweep at Michigan, winning his third pole of the season there. Now, 3 of Elliott's 5 career poles had come at Michigan. Bill once again finished the season strong, winning 2 of the last 5 races, and picked up another pole at Atlanta. The team's consistency once again resulted in a third-place points finish. The most impressive thing about the season was Bill's average starting position of 5.2, the best in the entire Winston Cup. Now this is where the real fun began. NASCAR's speed started increasing even more in 1985, and the pole speed for the Daytona 500 was set to be over 200 miles per hour for only the second time in NASCAR history. Bill Elliott had to be frustrated at this point, having not won the 500 after 3 straight top 5s in the event, including his 83 runner-up. Bill snagged his first superspeedway pole with a record-setting pace of 205 miles per hour. Bill's pace carried over to the race, where he dominated. Elliott was nearly an entire lap ahead of second place when he was called to the pits under green by NASCAR for a broken headlight assembly. Elliott didn't let this end his day, as he eventually fought his way back to the front and won the Daytona 500 in one of the most impressive performances ever, leading 136 laps despite being black flagged mid-race. This was only the beginning of what was to come in that season. After a couple crashes in the next 2 races, Bill returned to victory lane at Atlanta in the fourth race of the season, and then swept Darlington a couple weeks after with the pole and the win. The ninth race of the season was the Winston 500 at Talladega. The previous fall, the pole speed was just over 202 miles per hour. This time around, Elliott would snag the pole at a whopping speed of 209.4 miles per hour. Unsurprisingly, this was a new track record, and Elliott was the favorite to win again. On lap 48, Elliott had a puff of smoke come from the engine, and he headed to pit road under green flag conditions. The team feared a blown engine. However, after popping up the hood, they discovered it was an oil pump issue. Elliott stood idle on pit road for about a minute and a half, and then was released back onto track in 26th place, just 2 seconds from going 2 laps down. Elliott's day was done. Or was it? Less than 100 laps later, Elliott was surging past Kyle Yarborough for the lead. Somehow, Elliott found a way and won his second straight superspeedway race of the season. This is probably Bill Elliott's most famous victory. From almost 2 laps down to a win, all under green flag conditions, at a superspeedway. That is legendary. Over the next 13 races, Bill would go on one of the greatest runs in NASCAR history with 8 poles and 5 wins. In this span, Elliott would sweep the Michigan races, winning both poles and both races, and win the poles for both Talladega and Daytona. This meant that Elliott won the pole for all 4 superspeedway races in 1985. He also completed the Winston Million, a contest in which winning 3 Crown Jewel races awarded an additional $1 million prize. At the 6 ovals, 2 miles or longer, Elliott had 6 poles and 4 wins. By season's end, Elliott finished the year with 11 wins and 11 poles. But unlike years before, the team lacked consistency, and he would fall 101 points short of the championship, finishing behind Darrell Waltrip. The next season, Melling Racing didn't have the same speed across the board. However, their superspeedway speed remained the same. Elliott got the pole in the Daytona 500, but only led 2 laps before being taken out of contention by a crash on lap 117. He once again won the pole for the Winston 500 and led 116 laps before his engine blew, with less than 15 laps to go. Elliott finally won a race in round 14 at none other than Michigan. Elliott's streak of 6 superspeedway poles in a row would end at Daytona that summer, where he started second behind Kyle Yarborough. Bill won the pole at the fall Talladega race, but would retire again to a mechanical failure. Elliott would win only 1 more race that season, and it was the second Michigan race. He had now won 4 straight Michigan races, and 5 of the last 6. 1987 was a return to form for Melling Racing and Elliott as they won the pole for the Daytona 500 again, this time with a record pace that stands to this day, 210.364 miles per hour. If you'd come to me the year before and said we would come back and top 210, I would have laughed at you. But when I came back in from running those laps, it was like, man, wow, that was fast. Elliott dominated the race, leading over 100 laps and returned to victory. We all know the story of the 87 Winston 500, but let's briefly recap. This was the weekend Bill set the all-time record lap at Talladega, setting a pace of 212.8 miles per hour. Bobby Allison had this massive crash, which changed the direction of NASCAR, and ultimately ended up slowing down the speeds of the cars. Elliott would not go on to win the race, as he once again blew an engine just 30 laps before the finish. Elliott swept the fall Talladega weekend after not doing much at the summer Daytona race, and of course won Michigan again. He ended the season with 6 wins, 6 poles, and a second place finish in the points. Melling Racing wouldn't adapt well to the rule changes as NASCAR slowed down the cars, with Elliott's best superspeedway start of the 1988 season being 8th at the fall Talladega race. It did all come together for Elliott though, as he was finally crowned champion at the end of the year and took 6 poles and 6 wins through the year. This is where our story ends today. Even though Elliott continued to have fruitful years at Melling Racing for the next several seasons, his time of dominating 2.5+ mile tracks was over. Between 1984 and 1988, the fastest years of NASCAR, Elliott won 33 poles in a 145 race span. Between 84 and 87, Elliott had 4 poles and 8 starts at Daytona and a worse start of 3rd, with 6 poles at Talladega and a worse start of second. Not to mention the guy's ridiculous consistency at Michigan between fall '82 and spring '89. In 14 starts, Elliott had 7 poles, 13 top 3 starts, and 7 wins. This was a historic run that no one will ever replicate. Ryan Newman also had 11 poles in the 2003 season, but that was in a 36 race season, not a 28 race season. Bill Elliott is the fastest man in NASCAR's history, with the track record at both Talladega and Daytona, and it's safe to say neither of those will ever be broken. Anyways guys, that's it for this video. I hope you did enjoy, and if you did, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.